morning again, everyone. We'll get started with our paper session 2B with Francine Jackson, the train wreck that changed time.
Thank you. It was way over 20 years ago, I was actually able to convince the Rhode Island Committee for the Humanities that they really needed a talk on the history of time, with, of course, reference to the major observatory in the city of Providence. Shockingly, they bought it. I couldn't believe it. And they put me on their speakers list. Unfortunately, the very first time I was ever given an actual date was last year, a year and a half ago. And of course, by then my slides had kind of disappeared. I had no idea what to do. So I figured I had to make a PowerPoint. And of course, as most of you know, you just start, of course, with the sun, and what it does and how good it is, both for time-wise and position-wise. And then, the continuation of time, breaking it down, and all the different times of ways of measuring time until finally the pendulum clock came. But then just as I was about ready to continue here, all of a sudden at our local observatory, I happened to see a picture that I'd never seen before there. So I asked the curator, what's that? And he goes, it's a copy of the very first daguerreotype ever made of a plane wreck, of a train wreck. I went, oh. Well, where is it? Where did it happen? And the answer was a couple miles from my house in 1853. Of course, also being secretary of our local historical society, at the next board meeting, I kind of brought it up and mentioned, this happened? Of course, you have to have one. Oh, yeah, I wrote a couple sentences about it in my book a few years ago. Yeah, great. Do you know anything about it? No, just what I wrote in my book. Oh, okay, thanks. But a couple of us, decided that maybe we'd like to learn a little bit more about what happened. And what we found was kind of surprising. Now, remember, this is Central Falls, Rhode Island. Anybody ever heard of it? No, probably not. It's the next town over from mine. And it was just, the whole story of the railroad and how, of course, in the 1800s, how important this was. In fact, if it weren't for the railroad, we probably wouldn't be here now, because of its ability to carry goods and people all over the place. Now, in 1853, and I know most of you, in fact, even now, are working on your little computers, your tablets, and everything. And, every so often you get people, hi. Mr. Wright, in 1853, had to carry this around. Imagine carting this around on your shoulder all the time, looking for a picture, trying to do this. Well, in August of 1853, he did, and this is the picture. It probably doesn't look like much from where you are, but what you can probably see here is this is a locomotive kind of on its side. And there are people, there are people standing, but there are people strewn all over the place. What had happened was, there was a northbound train going to Boston, and then a southbound train from Worcester going down to the South County area of Rhode Island to the shore areas. And I have here a little recount by Mr. William Bates, who was one of the passengers on the southbound train. And he says, I was seated with my wife in about the middle of the second car. I was first alarmed for an instant by a terrible whistle. Then came crash upon crash with a violent concussion. All before me in the car seemed to be thrown into a confused mass together. Broken seats flying and the forward part of our car crushing in like an eggshell. I had time merely to say to my wife, keep quiet, don't rise, as the bottom of the car behind us shot directly over my head, taking off my hat. Yeah. Mr. Bates ended up becoming one of the heroes of that time, actually helping people come off, take their stuff off that had been thrown all over the place, throwing them literally out the window to safety and everything. But altogether, 12 people died immediately, a 13th very soon after as a result of his wounds. It was because of this train wreck that so many people died, because there had been wrecks before, of course. But people started thinking about time after this. Now, what had actually happened was, and I'm sorry, this is not an 1850s train, but it's the only one I could find. As you can see here, this train is coming down in this direction. and it will meet up with one track, as will this one here. Now, in this day in August of 1853, the northbound train was coming up and would have hit what was called the Boston Switch and moved to the right. 4 minutes later, the southbound train would have come from here, and because the track had cleared, of course, could safely go back down. On this day, Fred Putnam, who was a very kind of unskilled conductor, it was one of the first days he was ever in charge of a train, forgot his railroad allocated pocket watch and borrowed one from his neighbor, who was a milkman, for whom time wasn't as important as train scheduling. So because his watch was off, he got to the Boston Switch too fast, too soon, and the trains collided. And because of this, even though there had been wrecks before, usually with maybe 1 or 2 fatalities, that's about it, but the idea of 13 people in one shot, suddenly this became the catalyst for time zones. This is what led people to realize that something had to be done to regulate time. In the late 1860s, people started thinking, well, maybe we should, start doing something to break up time into different times and to make sure that time was really standardized. Originally, the only people who tried to were the railroads, but they only did it based on their own schedule. If you had like half a dozen trains going into the same station, each one had its own schedule of time. And this kind of went on until finally in 1918, as most of you know, we actually did the time zones. And of course, this is the virtual time zone, the every 15 degrees divisible by 15, surrounding by the whole bit. As you know, of course, politics kind of has to get into everything. So this is what they really look like now. But I know this whole story kind of made me realize that, remember, I think it was Tom Brokaw who said that all politics is local. This is what made me realize that all history is local too. And from there, of course, when it comes to the Committee for the Humanities, I did continue. I talked about, this is, the observatory at Brown, but that's another story. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Easy.
All right. Well, we'll wait just a few minutes to get started with our next one so we stay on schedule with our concurrent sessions. But our next speaker is John Elvert, who will be talking about IPS and GLPA.
Good morning. I guess time for another talk. Thanks, Francine. I really like that talk. That Brown University, or the observatory there, was interesting. Well, when I was up in, I'm cutting in my time here, but in Rochester, Rochester has a lot of these old observatories, or had, and they're all, some of them were really destroyed and now parking lots. But so that reminded me. Anyhow.
It's going to be a McDonald's. We have to play.
No, that's all right. Vision 2020 is my talk. The International Planetarium, or IPS, has recently launched an initiative to help guide IPS over the next 5 to 10 years. And the premise was, how can IPS help all its members? How can it support its members, its regionals, and not only in the U.S. but throughout the world? And so the IPS officers began what they call a Vision 2020 initiative to really ask its members throughout the world what the IPS can do for you. And so what I want to do is kind of summarize what has been happening, what will happen, and hopefully get your input if you haven't been able to give us your input already. So to summarize what V2020 is, the purpose, and of course, why are we doing this? Well, we, in brief, are doing it to guide IPS forward to meet changing needs and challenges, to define IPS's mission, vision, and value statements, something that IPS has never really tackled and never really completed. There are a couple of sentences that might allude to a vision statement or a mission statement, but nothing that really is concrete and really helps IPS. To include feedback and perspective from all members and related vendors, partners to better serve and support IPS membership over the next 10 years or 5 to 10 years, and to provide IPS the opportunity to grow and better support its membership in every region around the world. Are we going to have an IPS in 10 years? There's our membership has been flat, and there's a lot of challenges ahead in competing with other agents or groups that, such as Immersa and Doug and several other groups that are branching off and supporting their members. So how do we do this? Well, we want to do it through a strategic planning process. So we're going to ask fundamental questions: who we are, what we are capable of, where are we going, and what are our needs? And we've done this through 5 goals so far, and I'll step through those briefly. So we're going to set out with goals, and we're going to begin trying to answer and tackle those goals. What strategies do you focus on to achieve your goals? Your conclusions help develop or redevelop IPS mission, and we're going to use those goals as a roadmap to where, how, why, and when. So that's how we're doing this. In the strategic planning process, for those, maybe if some of you have gone through the process before, is to engage all interested stakeholders, every one of you, every vendor, even non-members, to develop strategies and mandates to accomplish these goals. So we again focus on what the vision for IPS is, what its mission and value statements, and what's the value of having IPS, and what's the value of having IPS for you, and the methods for developing strategies to achieve the goals, the objectives, action plans, and milestones. And we're going to begin and have begun. I hope you've been able to at least hear about this SWOT analysis issue. And this is not like something new that I'm up here and saying for the first time, but this process or this introduction of a PowerPoint presentation has been presented thanks to Dave Weinrich at MAPS and SEPA and WAC. And it has also been sent to all the reps throughout the world. The idea is that they will present this similar PowerPoint to their members at home. So SWOT, it's a collection of informative feedback that currently reflects the strategies, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of IPS. So what does that mean? The results of your answers to this will help us define this mission, the value, and the vision statements. For example, maybe some of you have already taken this questionnaire online, but for under strengths, we're a worldwide organization. For the weakness, membership has been flat for several years. And opportunities, what can we do? Well, we do want members to join IPS, and we want to know what they want from IPS. And a threat might be growing number of other dome-related organizations, like I mentioned a couple. Well, SWOT FUI. We've had a couple of people who have answered me personally and said, I've gone through this before. My organization has gone through this. Nothing becomes of it. You know, does it really change the culture of IPS, or is it just a formal process that you go through and then nothing becomes of it? Is there any significant personal value for me? You know, FUI with SWAT and FUI with you, and I do what I want in my planetarium anyhow. We've had over 200 people already respond to the survey online, and most of the respondents have been very, very nice. They've been very, very polite, but some of them have, you just can't change some people's opinion because of their own private vision, I think, of what they want to do. But the goals, we have 5 goals. One is to improve and increase professional development, strengthen ties with professional astronomy and space scientific community, expand international collaborations, gain greater recognition for IPS members and enhance financial support, and provide leadership in transitioning to next generation planetaria. So if we were to come up with a guideline on how to get and achieve all these goals, I think our entire mission and value for IPS would be entirely different. Strategic planning is not a wish list. It's not something, well, I hope we do this. When we decide upon our goals this weekend, we're meeting with the planning team and the IPS officers, we're going to accomplish this. Process needs a consensus and advice from everybody, so this is a kind of like a bottom-up procedure. It's not going to be a top-down, and that's been another complaint. Just the officers dictate or mandate. This is not going to be the case. IPS commitment and responsibility. Designated leader for each goal. I've already decided there are 5 leaders, and each leader was selected to provide leadership for that goal. And Carrie mentioned that yesterday, and she is tackling that first goal. Designated international advisory group to support the planning team. So right now, I think there's about 15 designated people in our community throughout the world, or related community, like ESO and JPL from South America and Asia, and they're here to advise the planning team. So we're getting as much input as possible, and the responsible for we want to be very responsible for this SWOT analysis. So how does GLPA tie into this? Well, you guys are really dedicated to planetarium education. And that's what IPS, that's the core of IPS, is education. But how do we do that with all our new tools and the way we teach under the dome? We need your input. And, GLPA is probably the largest region, but I think that it's got the smallest number of IPS members. So the ratio there is somehow not right. We want to fix that. So IPS and GLPA, we want to hear from you. Either give us, meaning the IPS officers or myself, verbal feedback. I have a complete handout survey here. So if you'd like to fill out the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
There's a mistake in the web.
Or you can go online, and I've been told there's already a mistake.
IPS?
I'm sorry, yeah, of course, IPS. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so I'm hoping that really all of you personally take some responsibility in at least, you don't have to agree with IPS or what our mission is, but give us some feedback and why you don't agree or do agree, or what we should do better, how we should improve IPS so it benefits you and your planetarium and GLPA as a whole. Thomas Krapa, of course, is here. He's the president of IPS, as well as Dave Weinrich. And we are meeting with the planning group tomorrow and getting together with the IPS officers on Sunday. And we hope to have this initiative fully implemented by IPS 2016 in Warsaw, Poland, in a year and a half almost. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Dave.
John, one comment I want to make. When I gave this presentation at some of the other regionals, we saw that some of the same issues facing IPS were some of the same issues that are facing the regionals. Kind of flat membership, younger members not getting involved so much in the leadership positions. So some of these issues are present across all of our affiliates also. And we really need strong affiliates in order to have a strong IPS. It's not IPS down, but it's, you know, membership through affiliates and up. That's, you know, bottom up, not top down.
Thank you. All right. We're, oh, yes. One more, and then we'll get started with our next presentation.
I'm just curious, how many of you are IPS members? Wow, that's great. It's probably wonderful. But I just want to mention also, like John has mentioned, it's not kind of competing. It's not about competition between such a large and important regional and really for a big with a impact beyond the region like GLPA. You're really such an important group. It's not competing with you. It's finding out how we can add something, like plug into that and deliver something to regionals which goes beyond, which adds a value on top of that. And we all know that at the conferences that people may ask, it's usually said, oh, well, I can't afford going to the conferences, that's why I should be an IPS member. Okay, there is the IPS journal, but we all are aware that we probably have to focus on deliverables, on things happening between the conferences, work in committees, and really guidelines, standards. But that's where also GLPA, with all its activities, and I see Dale here, who has been a shining light in IPS, but also in GLPA. And so it's very important that we kind of not duplicate things, but do something which a regional organization can't do, and we help each others and make a meaningful combination. So that's what we are after. Not like we don't want your money in terms of why aren't you a member? It's just 50, 70 bucks or something. It's really about goals and shared visions we have in improving what we do at planetariums. So, and I think internationality helps, and we need to find out how we can make it more helpful for you. So that's really important, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for going over.
All right. And our last paper for this session is a double paper by Jean Bishop.
I'll just hold it. That's fine. I'm so glad to see that there are quite a number interested in this, because we do have the other paper session. And you've met Tomas Krappe, our president of IPS, John Elbert, the Vision 2020. I'd like to, and David Weinrich, who is past president of IPS, also in this room, Dale Smith in publications, and Ann Bragg, who will become treasurer of IPS. At the meeting on Saturday morning, tomorrow morning, I'll be giving a little bit more information about the structure of IPS, but I really want to say this. Joanne Young has been elected the new president-elect, who will become president in January, and so we can look forward to her leadership when Tomas Krappe becomes the past president in January. Right? Sean Latch will become president, and Leanne Hennig will retain her position as secretary of IPS. You've seen so many of you are members of IPS, you've seen the IPS, wonderful IPS journal under the editorship of Sharon Shanks. And in that, a lot of wonderful pictures by the conference photographer in Beijing, and the, I think Dale, a number of your pictures appeared in there. Dale takes wonderful pictures. I took pictures also, and this is my personal view of the conference in Beijing. So I'd like to take you, my friends, virtually to Beijing with me as we look at the conference that occurred in June 23rd to 27th of this year. This is this is how the dates went for the conference. I went on the post-conference trip to Xi'an. There were a couple of others, including a trip to Japan, but mine was to Xi'an. I don't have more than a couple photos of that. Mostly it's for the conference. Notice that the council meets for 2 days before the actual conference begins, and this is always the way that it occurs. And it's a lot of hard work for a long 2 days with that. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that 2 of those didn't get rotated. This is outside of the buildings, all of the buildings that compose the Beijing Planetarium where this conference took place. And those blocks and that sign held by a young person from China, probably the Beijing Planetarium, were 2 of the things that advertised this event. This is a really nice agenda that looked like something that you would find in a much bigger place than this. Actually, the Beijing Planetarium has over 100 employees. This is the old planetarium. Dale Smith and I were there in 1997, and they have kept activities there, but they have built another huge building for exhibits and auditorium and classrooms and planetarium that's beside this. Here's another view of the planetarium that was from a talk that was given by one of the employees of the planetarium, and this is how it was when it opened in 1957. So they had stages of their use, and 57 was the first year. And that's how, also from that talk, things looked back early. From the front, that planetarium looks like this, and there's a wonderful plaque in that center of the windows door area that has engravings of ancient Chinese constellations. This is a view of that dome from the new exhibit building and new planetarium that's close by. I don't know how I didn't do this. I guess I was doing this late at night, but that is the exhibit building with some of the wonderful things that are there. I didn't realize. Okay. Here is that set of things that is a little further back, a perspective from a little further back. Observatory. There's a meteorite on the back of the old planetarium that is huge. And if one stands beside it, you can see that it's about the size of a person. This is the actual 1976 projector that was in that planetarium when I visited in 1997, the old planetarium. This was done by somebody who I think rivals what Zeiss can do. His name was Wu Xiaohao, and he had at the vendor tent a new planetarium that they were selling. He was with a company now in China. But he's met with someone who received an award in, well, he didn't get it in China. He got it at another later time when Thomas Krappe was able to be there and helped present it to him in Germany, Ludwig Meyer. And Ludwig Meyer and Mr. Wu Xiaohao, they met together for a whole week. 2 top engineers in the planetarium field. They met in Venice, I understand, a couple years ago, and were able to talk about their experiences in designing planetariums. This is an earthquake, an ancient earthquake recorder and a celestial globe. There's the old planetarium, and inside of that are wonderful exhibits. I know that this one has some interest to planetarians because we sometimes tell the Chinese story of the weaving goddess who crosses over to the herdsman, and they are married and they neglect duties, so the Queen of Heaven makes a hairpin kind of swipe across the sky and separates them. But the magpies come up in July on a special day and make a bridge so that they can cross. And this is the top of the dome of the old planetarium. Those are the magpies indicated, the herdsmen. And there's a pendulum, a Foucault pendulum there. That's the planetarium projector that's now in the old planetarium. And exhibits there are wonderful in that old planetarium. This is showing the parallel sphere of Earth rotation that one gets at the North Pole. Some exhibits that I think are very, very valuable, but I've never seen before done quite this way that they do. These are diagrams of the ideas, the ancient ideas of the purple palace enclosure and the Supreme Palace enclosure and the market enclosure. And on that 1976 projector that Wu Xiaohao made, he had all of these enclosures plus 28 constellations of the ancient Chinese and also some other things that were from the ancient ideas. I don't know if you know Julia Stahl's book that goes into a lot of the ancient Chinese things, and you can see it, or what you could have seen it on that old planetarium. Notice something about this? Wrong. It's backward. That's the way they were exhibiting it. But this idea done right can be found at the ancient Beijing Observatory stop for the underground subway. They have a wonderful picture of just that in tile, but it is a script there. All right, now this is the IPS fence, which shows a wonderful history of IPS. Unfortunately, there it is back there. Unfortunately, no pictures before Alan Friedman's presidency in 1986. I was president in 1984, so they somehow didn't get a picture that went back. Maybe they didn't want to do that. But, oh gosh, there's Alan side by side. Yesterday, Dale Brown gave a seminar in honor of the work of Alan Friedman in the Portable Planetarium over at the other building. And Dale's in this. Dale's over one of the people for these different conferences. People are featured. It was fun. Okay, the conference began, as I said, 2 days after the council meeting, and the council meeting kind of looked like this. I was sitting beside Roland Jacobson over there. You see John Hare in there. That's Manos Kinsados. He's the new chair of the awards committee. I had the good fortune to work with Lars Broman, who has just resigned from that committee, and I was in place of Lars able to help present awards in Beijing. Again, that's what the work looks like. That's what we go and do. And we have things to do. There's Martin George explaining the problem with elections. We had resignation by our president-elect, Paul Knappenberger. And we had to do something. Just decided we'd hold the special election, and that's when Joanne was elected. That's the council right there. Okay, starting the conference, this is Jin Xu. He's the director of the Beijing Planetarium. And Jin has a wonderful staff that worked with him. And we were so fortunate to have all of the things that he and his staff had planned so beautifully for a week. That's the audience as this opened. I think about 20 GLPA members attended out of about 700 people who were at the conference. There's Tomas. He's opening the conference with a very gracious speech. And he and Jen and a few other notables opened and stood beneath an IPS balloon that was dropped. You see David Weinrich there. He is part of the important group of people that opened the conference for us. And we were delighted by a group of Chinese children who sang for us. So I've included a few pictures here. They were just glorious. And then we had a speech by someone from the space program in China. This is China's lunar exploration program, Ouyang Zhiyuan. And although he spoke in Chinese, we had translators, so there was no problem for us to catch all of the things that he said. And I learned things I never knew about the Chinese program. They had goals, have goals, and they've done a lot of things already. They're just not featured too well here. Maybe some of you keep up with China's program, but I did not know so much of what they have done, and we were privileged to hear about it. Landing site of Chang'e. Did you know about Chang'e even? That's the lander of the moon program, and there's a little rover that goes out across the surface. Remember last night how we heard that stories are important for conveying and keeping information in long-term memory? Well, the story of Chang'e and the rover is very neat. Somebody on the China equivalent of YouTube said, in the words of this rover, I'm so sorry that I'm not going to be able to fulfill my mission. It stopped being able to move around, even though it's still transmitting. And I'm sorry, Chang'e, I've let you down, but I urge you and your mission on. Just taking a human kind of voice for the rover. And I guess that has been exploded into interest in the program throughout the world. Stephen Colbert even took it over, that idea, and has talked about it. Chinese program. Now this is David Eicher from Astronomy magazine giving us a talk about educating the public. He deplores the way that the media have catered to things that are sensational and not very accurate. Thank you. And he told us about a very interesting conference that it was held in 2011. Neil Armstrong was there, called Starmus, a combination of astro interests and related interests and music. And I was able to attend. I found out about it this way and was able to attend. Tomas was there as well. I don't think anyone else in this room was there. It was great. It was just great. Okay, this is Sun Xia-chun. Dale and I met him in 1997. It was great to see that he had become an expert in the history of astronomy in China, and he blew us away with some of the things that are happening there. We knew about this, but he reminded us all about what Chinese astronomy is. It is supposed to be, the ancient idea is supposed to be a reflection of the cosmos. Man follows the heavenly cycles. And all we do is supposed to reflect that. And the ancient emperors knew that too, and so a lot of money went to Chinese astronomy. They estimated that a billion times more money in real dollars of the time went into astronomy than it would be today. So they really concentrated on astronomy. There's a Taosi site that's 4,000 or so years old in Shang province, and it's like a Stonehenge. Here you see in the northern Song reign, it's about 1000 AD, errors of planet motions. They preceded the accuracy of planet prediction and understanding by about 600 years. Preceded Kepler. It didn't advance, and he talked about why the astronomy didn't go forward from there. But they had the money from the government, and they let the astronomers who wanted to pursue this do. They gave them money for it, and they had understandings then. Okay, this is another speaker. He's from Russia, wonderful speaker. His name was Nikolai Samus, and he had visited and talked with people all over the former Soviet Union to find out what astronomy and education in astronomy was like. It was a very detailed, very research and kind of pedantic lecture, but very, very well done. And there, after his talk, you see him in the middle. You see Dale and I and Martin George. Okay, this is This is our speaker, our host, and Jen is talking about some. All right, wait a minute. Yes, he's giving a paper. He gave the first paper. I gave the second paper, by the way, on education, and that appears in the planetarium at Tomas's suggestion. So you could find my new column. I'm new IPS education chair, and you can find that talk I gave there. Okay, this is Omar Fikri. I picked this out because some of you went to Egypt. Who went to Egypt? Well, he told us all about the things that have developed since that conference, and I know everybody has had some feeling of like, whew, glad we went then, instead of when the protests and revolution began. Well, Omar keeps his planetarium open. These are people who are milling about, sort of semi-protesting. This is what they did on the steps of that planetarium to kind of protect the planetarium. Angry protester. They did break some windows, he said, and they got in, but most everything is okay. Attendance has gone way down, but they stay open. Isn't that neat? It's the Alexandria Egypt Planetarium at the Library of Alexandria, where we all were. I can envision myself in places where he's talking about the protests. One of the first talks after me, Patty Seaton, this was a really nice talk about how she uses her planetarium to motivate students to write, create poetry. There's Li Bing, who I met in 1997, who was giving a talk about Chinese contests for writing poetry that goes with celestial phenomena. Do you know this man? Yeah, he gave a fantastic talk. His work is mind-boggling, and he gave a nice talk and workshop. This is Simonetta Nicoli giving a talk about a little planetarium. All kinds of things were given in the paper sessions. Panel discussion, John, did he stay or go? Okay, this is the Vision 2020. Okay, some things in the planetarium. Just quickly, some pictures from some wonderful demos. There's a new task force on data visualization under Mark Subaru, who has a wonderful group of people working with him. You can check out who those people are on the IPS website. Get to the IPS website. It has a lot of things to share with you. And some of those people gave great talks in the dome. All right, this is the vendor tent. And there's sideways the new Nova projector of the a company that Mr. Wu Shouhou has. There he is. He and Ludwig Meyer, I think, are the most advanced engineers of the optical mechanical type of projector. And I'm so happy to hear in my mind that they got to meet and talk together in the vendor tent. That's Elena, who served candy. In fact, I got a whole box of Russian candy in the vendor tent. This is I don't know if you can see, I've got a seat from a distance, but that's David Weinrich there, getting his past president award from Tomas. That was at a lunch. I was way back, and this is I'm not a conference photographer. This is what I was able to do. These were the Macau Full Dome Awards. I wanted to show this picture because this is Maciek Legowski. He is the program chair of the upcoming Warsaw, Poland conference that will occur in 2016. And we will be able to tread where Copernicus did. If you come to that conference, it probably will be less expensive than the one that was here. He is hoping for your comments about survey. He wants to make it a conference not just for the big planetariums, but for the small planetariums as well. He wants to have 4 main kinds of emphases, and a portable tent, a portable city with a coffee cafe close by. He's got big ideas, and I think that they're pushing, he and Monica Malinowska are pushing forward to make this a super conference. So I'll say a little bit more on Saturday morning, but I think it'll be great. Here's Dale giving one of the awards. Who is that?
Same shirt.
Dale, who is the person there that you're giving that award to?
Dan Davis.
Dan Davis, okay. There's the awards, current awards chair, Manos Mitsonos, and that's Steve Savage, who also ran for president, or president-elect, in this special election. And you might be interested in knowing that it was very close, that election. We voted to let people know how that election turns out with votes, and it was only a handful of votes different. So Steve is also highly esteemed by the community. Here's our treasurer, Sean Latch, also presenting full-dome awards in this special award. We had 2 awards, well, 3 award sessions, including the one for David. We had that one, and we had the one at the banquet, and then we had this special session. Part of the awards for that full-dome contest were given in Macau before the IPS conference. Okay, this is mid-conference tour. How much time is left?
You have about 3 minutes.
Okay, well, let me just show you a little bit about a mid-conference tour. Everybody went on these. Either you went to the Forbidden City or the Temple of Heaven and the ancient Beijing Observatory. It was part of the fees, everything that worked out. I had been to the Forbidden City, but I wanted to go again to the ancient Beijing Observatory, so I selected this with the Temple of Heaven. This is Temple of Heaven. This is ancient Beijing Observatory. That armillary was installed in the Ming Dynasty, 1497. It's a Jesuit instrument. There's a number of these that are on a rooftop as well as in the courtyard of the ancient Beijing Observatory. And these instruments were like taikos, except they have Chinese embellishments. In fact, taikos instruments, all, if you know the history, all molded in a basement, I guess, in Germany, and finally were thrown out. And the ideas, couldn't bring any paper in, ideas in the Jesuits' head went to build these, and these, you want to see taiko's instruments, these are taiko's instruments, except with the, kinds of things that are Chinese. This is what taiko had. Ancient Beijing Observatory. Song Dynasty, end of the thousands, I think it was 1092, the fixed scoop escapement made a clock, a clepsydra, accurate to 18 seconds a day. Top of the ancient Beijing Observatory and a number of instruments. Look at the polluted air. It wasn't always like that when we were there, but it is polluted. This is the end, the banquet. Some of you remember this young lady on the right. She wore rabbit ears in Baton Rouge, and she was there to greet us as we walked through. She's from Japan, and there's her friend. End of the conference was a beautiful banquet with all kinds of entertainment, including this kind of thing. I think Sharon published a picture like this in the journal. There, I am helping to give awards, and Manos, who's giving awards to fellows on the stage. There's Tomas with Manos, and talking about Ludwig Meyer. Ludwig got the award in another location. There is Jin, the director, and very important people who helped during the conference. Way over on the right, and you may have seen this picture with Thomas in the planetarium, is Xiao. Xiao is the assistant director, or special assistant to Jin. And I think the assistant director is the one in the center of this picture. There we are passing to Monica and to Machik, the IPS flag, Jin in the middle, and Tomas at the side. And after everything official was done, we were taking pictures all around. There's Xiao, who I had met at other conferences that for planning, and Xia that's on the other side. Xia, I want to leave you with, said something in paper that I just think epitomizes planetarium professions, and that is, the stars are the soul of the planetarium. Isn't that nice? The stars are the soul of the planetarium. Bullet train to see the terracotta warriors. Okay. And that's it. I wanted to just hold up this. This was the program. And in Xi'an, at a Buddhist temple, I had them, everybody was having their name written. I said, write planetarium. And I think in their way of translating it is a sky museum or something like that, but planetarium. Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Is it okay with time? Yeah. Okay. I hope that all of you will be IPS members. I'm glad to see there's a lot, and I do think that we have, John's gone, but I do think we have a higher number than you might think in proportion to other affiliates. When we were at Baton Rouge, we had a very high number. It went down because of the China.
I can't hear you.
I think our membership went down at the time of the China conference, but we were up high proportionately, numbers of GLPA members in IPS. And I do urge you to share any thoughts about IPS with me, as well as through the surveys with John and other people who are important in IPS.
I believe we have 2 minutes if there's any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, no, you go back. Get her.
I was wondering if the instruments that are on top of the building are in any danger from all of the air pollution.
I think so, but they're pretty substantial. I think, in a couple hundred years they might want to look at redoing them again. When Dale and I were there in 1997, they had just redone them. It was the 500th anniversary of the Beijing planetarium's instruments, and they redid them at that time. They look pretty good, right? They aren't the originals. They aren't the originals.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no time, okay.
It is now the break, but.
But maybe just mention there were a few workshops which I think might be of interest for GLPA members. What's coming? There's one we started a new group chaired by Ian McLennan. Remember, we had this document, so you want to build a planetarium. So I was thinking it's about time. It's overdue that this needs to be done completely renewed. There will be a new document coming out, and it will be a web-based document, a living document, and architects and designers, but also the operation of the planetarium is focused. It's not really building a planetarium. It's really with the people, so you need staffing of planetarium operating. So this is an interesting group, I think, to reach out and to communicate with, chaired by Ian McLennan. He's the chair of that group in IPS. building and operation of planetariums. So there were many sessions run by committee chairs with new focus groups on new tasks, which might be interesting for regionals also. And we like, there might be benefits in the future, like building a new planetarium. So we want to have documents you can use then. So it might be interesting. In Macau, last comment, Macau, we had a pre-conference event in Macau, and for the first time IPS was kind of embracing a full dome festival, a content festival, and it may be a model for the future. We have to evaluate that, because we all know planetarium is not just movie playback, it's way beyond. But it's one aspect. We're trying to highlight good content, and you find everything in the upcoming proceedings and also on the IPS website and in the planetarium. Thank you.
Thomas established 4 new groups in his presidency, and just one of those is the design, but I'll say more tomorrow at the business meeting.
All right, thanks so much. It's time for a break, and then at 10:30, the astronomy update.